Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Remember, if you do listen to the podcast on a regular basis, if you could leave a rating and review, take a screenshot, email it over to me at techblogwriter@outlook.com and I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. To give you a little peek behind the curtain, I'm often around 2 weeks ahead in podcast episodes to make sure that you never run out and there's always an episode waiting for you when you get out of bed in the morning. But today is actually Earth Day as I record this. And there's such a big focus on sustainability, decarbonisation. But it can feel sometimes that we often forget that there are just 100 companies in the world that are actually responsible for 71% of global emissions, according to a study. And everything seems to be more about blaming consumers instead of those companies. But hey, there's another podcast for another day. But at a time where cost of living's going up and energy prices are getting quite concerning, especially here in the UK, I read about a company called Lumin, which is focusing on making decarbonisation affordable for everyone. And hearing something like that at a time where everyone's getting increasingly concerned about rising energy costs and costs of living, I felt compelled to learn a little bit more and get his story on here. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the US, where Alex Bazhinov from Lumin is going to talk about all this, share his story, and how we can all make a difference. But enough from me. Let's get him on the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about your journey, how you got here, and share your origin story with everyone listening?
Hi, Neil. Hi. Hello to all of your listeners, and thank you for having me. You know, my story and my path to where I am today really started, at least the first part of it was, it was very unlikely that I get to where I am today, because my first 10 years of my career after I graduated, I spent in the mining industry of all the places. I was working on natural resources extraction, so mining in the most traditional kind of definition, not the crypto mining. And I was involved with some of the largest metal miners and manufacturers, and then moved on to a company that was manufacturing and selling, servicing large mining equipment. So if you could imagine, a mine site and all those big mechanisms that excavate and drill and so on. And really, it was a very successful career for me. Quite early, I think, in my career, by the age of 30, I was a chief financial officer of extremely large division of international public conglomerate. And through that career, I firsthand saw how unsustainable is everything about natural resources extraction. Mm-hmm. On one side, I think something that's generally understood today, right? It is bad to extract and burn fossil fuels because they pollute our atmosphere. They, cause climate change. It is bad. But there is another side of kind of that, of the natural resource extraction industry, and that is we are actually running out of stuff. I mean, I'm not like a doomsday person. I'm not going to cry, oh my God, tomorrow things are going to end. No, and I don't have a crystal ball to tell you today, oh, we're going to last 10 years or 50 years or 100 years. But naturally, there's a limited amount of resources underground, and it is getting more and more difficult to find new resources. The ones that we can locate are based in more difficult to reach locations. So under the ocean bed, somewhere way up north. So it's getting more and more expensive to extract natural resources. And again, I speak kind of very widely about that. So it could be both fossil fuels, but also metals and coal and other things that we take from under the ground. And so for me, at that point in my career, the big question became, what's next, right? Energy is the core driver behind our development as civilization. The entire human history, if you look back, is based on the sources of energy that we subsequently used. Our ancestors lived in caves and had a very poor quality of life, and then they ended up with managing fire, and that allowed them not only to warm themselves but also clear much larger parcels of land, and that spurred agriculture and took them to the next level. That at some point they figured out qualities of coal, and eventually coal brought us industrial revolution, which again took us as civilization to the next level. And at some point we realized, oh, wait a second, that liquid that we use as a lubricant for our machines, we can actually burn that, and that's oil. In in most ways, the current level of our development is based on that energy source. And as I talked about a couple of minutes ago, we are running out in some sort of visible horizon. So the question that I asked myself at the time was, what is next? And what is the next source of energy that is abundant, that is clean and renewable? And the answer for me was, well, we have a nuclear reactor in the sky that sends enough energy toward our way that we could, if we were to harness it all in 1 hour, that would be enough for us as humanity for an entire year. And how do we do that? And that's really where my path towards clean energy industry, broadly speaking, started. But it was by far not. It was really hard to predict that this is where I would go naturally, starting my career in the mining industry.
And you would be amazed, in nearly 2,000 interviews. That's the message that I get. Almost every answer that people give me, it was almost like the universe gives people that little nudge in the right direction.
Yeah.
Things happen at the right time in the right place, and put you where you need to be at that time. And of course, that path led you to Lumin. And I'm conscious we will have people listening hearing about Lumin for the first time. So could you just tell the listeners a little bit more about the story behind the company and the problems that you solved there?
Absolutely. As I learned a lot of things about the current state of renewable energy, all sorts of technologies that are coming up and becoming more and more available and ubiquitous, I formed a vision, and really that vision went into Lumin's foundation. And it is based on pretty much the trends we're seeing today, but they were fairly obvious 5, 7, 8 years ago, that many technologies, especially distributed energy resources or distributed energy technologies such as solar, energy storage, electric vehicles, these technologies and products are becoming more and more abundant. And going into the future, the good news is there will be only more of that, which is great. That's what we need. But I thought, I thought a little bit about that. In my thinking was that if you kind of observe that trend into the future, where we will end up is that every building in the future will be run as an independent microgrid. The buildings will still be connected to the larger grid, so they will still have that ability to import or export electricity, from or to the grid. But each building will be making its own decisions real time on when, where, and how to consume electricity. Where should it be coming from right now at this very minute, this very second? Should it be coming from the grid? Should it be coming from solar panels on the roof? Should it be coming from a battery that I have in my basement, and so on? And then where it is going to, which appliances, which things in my house is that energy is going to, and how does that correlate with current electricity pricing, how clean the electricity is on the grid, what's the energy mix, what are my preferences, is the grid there? We see more and more that with climate change and natural disasters caused by that, or really in many ways you could think of them as abnormalities in weather patterns. Like, for example, what happened in the US a year ago in Texas in the winter. Like, no one was expecting that cold weather and that much snow in Texas, of all the places. So that caused the grid to go down for a week, and it was really bad for people over there. So we see more and more of that. Unfortunately, there will be more natural disasters like that moving forward. So then all of a sudden you have this very strong factor. What if the grid is not there? Then how does my house consume electricity? Where do I want it to go? So the vision of those independent microgrids, buildings as independent microgrids, still being connected to the grid, having the ability to join together to provide more value to the grid, to provide services like demand response or ability to reduce overall electric grid demand, to provide services or even trade with each other, right? Put it simple, you should be able to buy electricity from solar panels on your neighbor's roof because he has panels. If you don't, you have a wire that connects both of you. It's called the grid. Even today, in buildings, will be doing that automatically without user interaction, naturally based on user preferences. So that vision, this is the vision that went into Lumin's foundation. And early on, we set out to build a platform that allows to manage consumption in your house, so manage individual devices and appliances, get the data on that energy consumption and control them, and then connect them to your on-site solar, your on-site energy storage, and throttle both kind of supply and demand of electricity inside that house. So at the highest level, that's what we do. That's what Lumin is. Naturally, we there's some products out there. So we build hardware and software. The hardware is an energy management system that installs in a house. It is a retrofit system, meaning you don't need to replace any components of your house, your electrical system, your whatever you have in there. Our system seamlessly and quickly installs onto the existing electrical wiring and enables that control and data. And of course, there's a lot of software running on the system, running in the cloud, processing the data, helping the homeowner through algorithms, to manage their energy consumption and save money, get more resilient from energy standpoint of view, and so on.
And over here in the UK, the energy prices have doubled in the last few months, and even rumours that they could triple by the end of the year. And I'm curious, since you started Lumin, how have you seen attitudes change towards customers wanting visibility into their energy consumption habits, and specifically how individual appliances in their home behave? Because it's something I'm seeing over here, but when did you first seeing this trend?
Absolutely. I mean, energy prices in general, in trends like what you mentioned in Europe, right, with skyrocketing natural gas prices. That's what's the driver, of course, of those electricity prices. Over here in the U.S., there are lots of changes going on as well. Some of them are based on the ways utility companies want to treat solar panels or solar systems, for example. They're changing the rules where instead of being able to sell back to the grid at the same price as you buy, which is called net metering, they're introducing asymmetric net metering, or like, for example, California introduced this kind of idea of, they call it net metering 3.0, where you can sell back to the grid at a fraction of the cost that you pay when you buy from the grid. It's the same electricity. Maybe those two transactions happen within a minute from each other, but and so of course there is a lot of interest and demand from homeowners to get the visibility. Also, it's driven by ongoing electrification of people's homes. As people start getting more into kind of using electricity for appliances or purposes that previously they were using some other energy sources. I mean, EVs or electric vehicles are a great example. You used to have whatever that that was, but a gasoline car, and you knew how much you were spending, right? Because you were going to the gas station and fueling up. But now you're charging from your pretty much wall socket, and you want to know how much does it cost. You want to see how much does my car consume. Is it really that efficient? Is it true that EVs are so awesome? Right? You want to know because now you may have one. Same is true for people who go solar. Now they want to see and understand, okay, now I put those panels on my roof and they say it's great. Obviously, it's really good for the environment, but how much do I save?
Yeah.
How much do they produce and what's the impact on my house? And oh, by the way, maybe I can adjust my behavior somehow, or better off, let some sort of automatic system do that for me, so I don't really need to do anything, in a way that could help me to save more money, but also reduce my carbon footprint. So, for example, maybe I should allow this system to charge my electric car on a sunny day. Which when I have excessive solar power, or something like along the lines of change my behavior, and like when I do my laundry, et cetera, et cetera. But that's more of a behavioral change. Obviously, you can automate that. Anyway, so there's definitely a lot of interest in that. Of course, we must understand that still electricity or your energy bill is a small percentage of typical household expenses, and it's a small percentage of people's time. And so it's not something that you're checking daily. And that's why the importance of automating things, right? Let things run in the background. So you kind of set them up once, and from there's some sort of mechanism, some sort of system or product that starts doing things for you based on your preferences is so important, and that's why we're focused on that.
And I think the current increase in energy prices is only going to exacerbate this. So can you walk me through how you're helping customers with these new rising demands and indeed expectations? Because that's where the magic is for you, isn't it? That's where you're really helping.
Absolutely. And I have multiple examples. Maybe for the sake of time, I'll just give you two. Yeah. So one, something that I already mentioned, right? Being resilient in making sure if there is a situation where the grid is down, whether it's because of natural disaster or some technological failure on the grid side, especially if you have a battery, so you have a home battery and your house may get some power. Congratulations, right? You can run your lights. But really, how do you go through that outage? And there are a lot of limitations that are present with batteries. Naturally, one of them is, well, how long can I last? Right? That's obviously how much charge do I have? But there are more deeper challenges that people don't, unless they're engineers and they understand batteries, et cetera, they don't really think about it, and they don't need to. But for example, one of them is, so we just talked about how much I can last. So essentially, how much energy I have in that tank. But then there's another one, which is, how large is that pipe? Well, obviously virtual pipe that comes out of that tank. And actually that pipe has a size and it's fairly small. It's called discharge capacity, speaking in battery terms, but all of a sudden you have to keep your house under that as well. So you have multiple parameters that you need to be managing. And naturally, how do you do that? Like you don't have a magic screen in front of you, and you don't know all that. And Lumin does that for you. In the case of an outage, we would manage your loads, again, based on what you're doing in the house, based on what you told us previously. Maybe you told us, look, My fridge, don't ever, turn it off. It's very important. I have beer in it. Like has to stay cold. But maybe something else in my house. I don't know, my washer. I don't need it in the case of the outage. So always disable it. And then there's some other things that may be optional. And I would love to have them on, but if I don't have the bandwidth or I don't have the enough discharge capacity, like you can probably dynamically disable them, and our system does that automatically for you. Another case, something I described in it may be more prevalent in the US, that case of net metering or the changing rules of net metering, where again, a homeowner with solar panels now is at the disadvantage, and it's really kind of bad for the economy, or not the personal economy, personal finance, to sell back to the grid because you're losing money. Our system would go around and help essentially to turn on loads in your house, help you to maximize the use of on-site solar. Instead of exporting it back to the grid, now you are consuming it in your house. With every kilowatt hour that you consume, you are saving money because you don't lose money by exporting back to the grid. And so these are some of the examples of automations that we provide. And we'll be adding much more. We'll be adding ability for people to add additional revenue by participating directly in wholesale electricity markets. And I don't mean like buying electricity, which we may or may not do in the future. But for example, also like providing additional services to the larger grid, like demand response, or essentially turning off or reducing load, electrical load, turning off some appliances at certain times when it is critical for the grid. And people can get compensated for that monthly. So you get a check every month, you get a payment from the grid, because Lumin kind of helped you to get, as a platform, connected you to that wholesale market, and now you're being paid. And that's amazing. And we're really love helping our customers to stack that values, because now you have multiple channels, right? You can monetize, you can go off grid, you can maximize your solar impact, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how we help.
Yeah, it's incredibly cool what you're doing there. And as this is a tech podcast, I've got to ask, can you tell me more about the technology that enables homeowners to automatically or even manually control their home's microgrid?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we have a system that seamlessly installs or retrofits your house. What that means is it is compatible with any electrical, wiring or circuit breaker panel that you may have. You don't need to replace any of that. Our system inserts, if you will, itself into your electrical system and gets the ability to essentially intercept electricity, both to read data and to control. We have built-in controls in the system. So these are essentially kind of smaller controllable modules and switches. We started with a product called Lumin Smart Panel, which was a larger panel that was installed next to your circuit breaker panel. But now we're moving to a product called Lumin Edge, which is evolution of our product, and we announced it a couple of months ago. And unfortunately, I don't have it with me because I'm taking this from my home. But it's a product size of your phone. Oh, okay. Very small module that installs on your individual wire. One module per electrical appliance or per electrical load, and that gives you data and control. You have an app in your phone, of course, that you can use to see what's going on in your house. You could use to turn things on and off. You could use to create schedules like my away schedule, my time of use when my electricity pricing is different, or whatever that is really, and to create those automations that I mentioned before, and get access to all these features.
And I'm curious, as someone that's working right in the heart of this space, are there any particular tech trends that excite you, and how do you see the industry evolving?
Absolutely. Lots of trends. So, on the technology side, there are a few things I probably will highlight. One, which is some of the developments in the energy storage or battery space. Now today, batteries unfortunately are still not cheap. As much innovation as they have received over the past few years, still quite expensive. And today, I believe there are a couple of very promising technologies that still need additional testing, of course, in getting to commercial level of being ready as a product. But for example, flow batteries, especially if you think about making them smaller and kind of fitting into something that would work for a residential side, that would be great. But as a general trend, I believe that with all the different things happening in this clean energy space, I believe that the good news that we'll have a very broad market with many different players, which is amazing. This is what you want, right? You don't want a single dominating player. We'll be market with many different players, many different technologies, many different brands, and it will provide a lot of competition, which is amazing. It drives innovation, drives progress. It will allow different products, if you will, come together in virtual grids and provide services, provide value to homeowners. But I also believe that one of the largest changes that will come in the next couple of decades, over the course of next couple of decades, is the role of the grid as we know it today will change dramatically. It will go from what it is today, which is generation and transmission distribution. It will go more so to be the enabling and infrastructure that truly enables that distributed grid, truly enables generation in energy storage being spread across the grid in all these buildings and all these homes with solar panels and generators and batteries and cars and all of that, right, will be enabled by the grid. But the grid will transform itself to more of this infrastructure play rather than being the essentially generator. The grid generates electricity and sends it into your house. That will change.
Wow, incredibly cool. And I'm not sure how much of this you can reveal, but what's next for Lumin? What's your big focus? Is there anything you can share on
So without maybe disclosing some of the upcoming announcements, but I think we've been pretty clear about what is our highest priority. And that is, that discussion that we had about enabling those independent microgrids and enabling them to participate in the larger grid. We started with building, this hardware software product that I described, the retrofit system, kind of that augments your electrical system in the house. But really, we saw that as the foundation layer that enables everything that's on top of it, that enables demand response aggregation, that enables other services that can be provided to the homeowner to stack their value, that enables great experience for them when they're off grid, that allows them to earn money, to save money on their solar, even further down, and so on. So we're looking to add more and more of these services rather than being focused on, a hardware product, which we have built, and it's amazing. And it does exactly what we need it to do. So for us, Lumin is more of an energy company, an energy services company, rather than electronics company.
We started with your origin story, and I always finish by asking my guests to leave everyone listening with a personal touch of inspiration by sharing maybe a book that has inspired them, or a song that helps them get their head in the zone, or just very important to them. What are you going to leave us with today, and is there a story to accompany your choice?
It's really difficult to pick one, for sure. There is a lot out there. I, as someone, a person who started a company, a startup, and who's gone through those early days I always try to help to other founders, because I know how difficult that is. Mm-hmm. It is a brutal grind, and people need to know this. So I'll probably kind of focus on that part, and I will recommend a book that was extremely helpful in early days of our company. And that book is called Lean Startup by Eric Rice, which really helps folks to wrap their head around lots of things that you may want or don't want to focus on when you are thinking about starting a company. And how do you go about that? What is really important? Where do you want to spend your time? As opposed to where you may think you need to spend your time, but you really don't. And some of these things may be obvious, some of these things are not. So definitely I would recommend that book as a must read for anyone who's going into startups.
Awesome. Love that. And before I let you go, for anyone listening, just want to find out a bit more information about anything we talked about today, your work at Lumin, etc., or even contact your team, what's the best starting point?
Oh, of course, will be our website, Lumin Smart, Lumin smart.com. There are contacts, there's lots of materials, there's lots of videos and pictures of what we do and our product and so on. So highly recommend checking this out. And of course, our LinkedIn and other social media.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your story. I think it's so important. How you got here is incredible. And also, I think it's such a hot topic right now. And I know the words that you've spoke will resonate with people listening all over the world. And energy prices, etc., is such a hot topic. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and all the great work you're doing and how you're leveraging technology to do that. So thank you.
Neil, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time and the questions, and best of luck to everyone listening to this.
I think this is a topic that we're going to be hearing about more and more over the next few years. And I think there will be a big focus on how we can all leverage technology to lower our carbon footprint, and the kind of new solutions and startups that will come out of this new focus as well around sustainability and decarbonisation. But if there's any comments from you, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Remember, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, but just send me a little note so I know that you listen to the podcast. And we'll keep this conversation going. I love hearing stories from all vantage points. So whether you agree or disagree with anything we've said, it's cool. That's why I record this show. I learn not only from the guests that come on and share their expertise, but also from you listening out there. That is what makes this show work. But enough from me. Thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.